because for now it's just us, the speakers. You can start accepting people, right?
Yes.
And then colleagues, we're gonna start at exactly 5 past. For now, I'm gonna, who just joined, we're just allowing a bit more time for other colleagues to join exactly at 5 past. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Happy to have you here. The name is Ismail Msweli from the African Wildlife Foundation, currently serving as the Senior Manager of the Youth Leadership Program, and I'm very happy to be your host for today in this very important discussion. Just a few notes before we start. A couple of you have joined with a link that is written Olivia Tawarar. If that is you and you see your picture and your name says Olivia, kindly rename yourself. You are welcome in the meantime to introduce yourself in the chat. Also, if you are not speaking, remember to mute yourself so that we limit background side. This webinar has both English and French translation. So in order to tune into either of the languages, when you look at the bottom of your screen, if you're using the laptop, there's going to be the tab for interpretation. Kindly click that. You're going to see 2 options, French or English. Choose your most preferred option. There's also going to be a section at the bottom that says mute original audio. Kindly check that as well in order to make sure that you're not hearing both languages at the same time, being the original speaker and the translation. And again, thank you so much for joining. We're happy to have you here. Today, we are here to discuss or celebrate rather the World Migratory Birds Day, an event that is celebrated twice a year with the significance that birds actually migrate twice per year. However, I am no expert in this topic, so I'm just running the show, and I've got the pleasure of having the colleagues that are knowledgeable in the space to join us. So just a few introductions. Thank you so much, colleagues, for making it. We are joined by Alex Ngari, who is the Program Manager of Migratory Birds and Flywirds at BirdLife International Africa. We have Louisa Kabuba, who is the Project Officer for Conservation Education at the Ghana Wildlife Society. We have Paul Gacheru, who is the program manager for species and sites at Nature Kenya. And lastly, but not least, we're going to be having a presentation from Jackie Trovillier, who's the executive secretary of the African Eurasian Migratory Water Birds Agreement. Thank you so much, colleagues, for accepting my invitation and for joining us today. But to start us off, we're going to be having a short video, having a look of bird migration. Janvan, over to your side.
There are about 10,000 species of birds in the world, and about 20% of those are migratory. It's really part of the fabric of biodiversity.
Migration is perhaps one of the most amazing shows that nature has to offer us. But this trip that they have to undertake is one of the most dangerous things in nature.
Birds may migrate thousands of miles from their breeding grounds to their wintering grounds, and there's tremendous energy requirements for that. They face storms. There's predators trying to pick them off.
And when you add humans to the landscape, migration becomes a lot more challenging. There's habitat destruction, so sometimes birds will get to their breeding or wintering ground and the area has been paved over.
It's estimated that domestic cats and feral cats combined take as many as 3.4 billion birds a year.
You get collisions with buildings along the way.
Now, we're not sure exactly of the numbers killed. It's somewhere between 100 million and 1 billion birds a year just hitting windows.
Climate change is impacting migratory birds in a number of different ways. It's putting a lot of stress on breeding populations.
So migratory birds are in a great deal of trouble. Since probably the middle of last century or maybe a little bit longer, bird populations have crashed, some by as much as 80%.
But there are several things that people can do to help bird conservation. The first one is just to care about it. If you care about neotropical migrants, you're also caring about your neighbors, about your country, and about the agriculture and the conservation and the ecosystems of a continent.
Getting in touch with your local Audubon chapter and participating in annual bird surveys would be huge. Doing eBird is huge. We use eBird data and survey data in all of our work to try and understand how different populations are doing.
You know, if you like cats, that's great, but don't let them wander outside. They need to be inside cats because of the impacts that they have. And if your office is in a tall building, turn your lights off.
Anything you can do to reduce your carbon footprint is going to help migratory birds.
And supporting science. We're learning an enormous amount of what are migratory birds doing at all seasons of the year and what we can do to help them. And those efforts need to be supported.
I am optimistic because I see how motivated people are, and I believe that when people are motivated and they come together to solve a problem, that they can. And I think it's happening. We just need to keep the momentum going.
Thank you so much, Janvan, for that. To start us off, it has become so common that we discuss things without first defining them. I'm going to welcome Alex from BirdLife to give us a presentation of What exactly is bird migration? Why do these birds migrate, and some of the insights of what happens in the journey as they move? Alex, you may present.
Thank you very much, Simangele. I want to share my presentation with you. Share screen. Can you see my screen, Simangele?
Yes, I can see it, but it's not yet on presentation mode. You can just put it on presentation mode.
What about now?
Yes, now we can see it. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you, Simangele. Thank you, participants. My name is Alex Ngari, as you've heard from our moderator today. And I'm really pleased to be presenting at this moment, celebrating with everyone the World Migratory Bird Day. In my presentation, I'm going to cover something about what migration is all about. It would be useful to hear about why we should actually celebrate migratory birds, and have a caption of how migratory bird populations are doing, what are their threats and dangers, and also what we need to do as a society. And in my last couple of slides, I'll be sharing with you what BirdLife is doing as a contribution to conserving migratory birds. So indeed, bird migration is a creative evolutionary solution to a problem solved by how Earth has been tilted. And tilting, for that matter, brings about seasons. We have very explicit seasons in the northern and southern hemisphere. We have summer, we have autumn, we have winter, and even spring. And these seasons determine the migration that we witness across the world. Some people call it an ecological tsunami, as indeed billions of birds search to cross continents twice every year. Why do they do that? They do that to escape unfavorable seasons, to find food, and even raise the young. And some people here might be asking, why don't I see these many birds actually moving around? You might not be able to see actually this, because a lot of birds migrate when we are asleep, because that time of the night, the conditions are calmer, there are no many predators hovering around. But those who are keen, especially those who are lucky to be positioned near what we call bottlenecks, they might be lucky to see huge birds crossing the very narrow crossing areas between continents. And mostly during the day, it is the soaring birds that fly. So a lot of people are able to see a huge number of birds flying during the day. Those are mostly the raptors, the soaring birds, the storks, the large-bodied birds, because during the day, it is easy actually for them to fly. So around the world, there are about 10,000 species, and an estimated 17% are actually classified by BirdLife as fully migratory. This is a big number of birds. And in Africa, we are talking of about at least 2 billion birds coming to the continent. And as you can see from this map, which is beside the text, Africa is placed in a very central place, and it is receiving actually birds from all over the world. So in terms of migrations, the African continent is a very important continent for the migratory birds. And broadly, you could classify migratory birds into 3 major groups: the land birds, the soaring birds, and even water birds. And all these birds use different strategies to move between the north and the south. So why should we bother celebrating the migratory birds? I mean, migration is actually a global spectacle which has shaped human behavior and culture from time immemorial. They are our sentinels. They tell us how the environmental health looks like or is like. So when we see populations of birds, going down over a period of time, then we know that all is not good. They connect our world. The birds cover vast distances and overcome extraordinary circumstances. I mean, we have to appreciate that, and we have to respect them. They give us inner peace. They are beautiful to watch. They are a source of enjoyment. They make our ecosystems complete and functional. So we need to celebrate them. I'll share a short story of 2 birds. One is the Arctic tern. Actually, if you look at the tern here, and when you look at the BirdLife logo, you see some similarities, of course, without the fish. So just to demonstrate how the migration of some birds is actually epic. The Arctic terns migrate from the Arctic Circle to Antarctic Circle. And it has been established that they can cover up to 80,000 kilometers. That is a huge, amazing distance. So another amazing bird is a small bird, the cuckoo. And in one of the projects where BirdLife has been involved, cuckoos have been established to start to travel all the way from Mongolia to Southern Africa and back. So who else has done this kind of travels? None but birds. So we need to appreciate them. So, but how are the birds doing generally? I'm picking 2 examples here from data that has been collected for some time. And on my left side is a graph of vultures, actually. The blue vultures are from Asia, and the red vultures are from Africa. So we can actually see what is happening. The green one is actually a long distance migrant crossing from using the entire Africa-Eurasian migratory region. And on the right side of the graph is an indication of how the land birds. Remember the three groups of birds: the soaring birds, the water birds, and the land birds. The land birds are not doing good, and the soaring birds, in this case, the vultures. So this tells us something. The water birds are not doing as bad, but in some groups, they are actually doing very bad, especially the shorebirds. So this tells, as I said before, something is actually not right. And what is this? So one of the big issues around impacting negatively on migratory birds is actually their habitat loss. And the human beings ourselves are at the center of destroying the migratory bird habitats. And some threats are actually very complex, especially when you mix, production, food, and man and human beings. I mean, it's a very complex issue. Agriculture brings a lot of things in terms of environment. You clear large tracts of land to increase food productivity. You use chemicals to ensure that the food production is making an economic sense. But all these things that we do are actually impacting negatively on birds. Overstocking, deforestation, and expanding human settlements, and of course the overuse of natural resources. All these are having negative impacts on populations of our migratory birds. The other thing is the energy infrastructure. And the problem here is that as people increase, the energy demand is even more. So there is more infrastructure coming online. And with poor planning, with poor designs of such infrastructure, poor siting and routing of, for example, the power lines, we have incidences of, birds interacting negatively with this infrastructure. And why is this happening? Lack of action, sometimes the people involved or concerned do not have capacity, they are not aware, or altogether there's no willingness to do anything because these impacts are actually very, very well known. And people might be asking, how does it happen? So in these photos, you get to see a whole family of white storks being disseminated by electrocution. It becomes like a dumping site for the dead birds. So these things are real. And on the other side, you can see a photo of a dead flamingo hanging on a power line. And I talked about energy infrastructure, and the wind turbines is one of actually these infrastructure that is causing problems to birds. And people might be wondering, I mean, a 30-meter blade, how does it cause havoc on birds? So I have a small video here, which I want to play to you to see actually how it happens. So this is a griffon vulture, which was which this clip was captured in the island of Crete in the Mediterranean Sea. And for sure, this guy is going to die, or the vulture will be injured and will remain sick for some time. So the other thing is that is taking our birds away, is actually killing, trapping, taking a trade of the birds. And here we are talking of millions of birds being taken away by humans. A study that has been carried out by BirdLife International, sometimes in 2016, estimated a total of 25 million birds being killed, illegally killed in the Mediterranean region. That is every year. So this is a huge volume of birds. But as if that is not enough, we have more killing, we have more taking away of birds happening in sub-Saharan Africa. But to date, we do not know how many of these birds are being killed. You might have seen some trapping in sub-Saharan Africa, and you might want to, to multiply that and with the number of countries that are there to get an idea of how things are. But BirdLife currently is carrying out a study to establish the figures, how many birds actually are being decimated in the sub-Saharan Africa, to get a good, clear picture. So, and different forms of capturing or trapping of birds are being used in the region. We have shooting, we have poisoning, we have use of sticky substances. I mean, there are nets, there are many devices that are all approaches that are being used to take birds away. So why it is happening? So bird killing is taking place because of many reasons, and one of them is food. If there is a sport, there is an element of illegal trade in all this. Poisoning to conceal illegal activities, and even untargeted poisoning or retaliatory attacks, especially happening between the livestock keepers and the predators. So, migratory birds really needs our help, or is actually it could be the other way around, that the migratory birds don't need us to be the way they are. It might be that human interference is actually not needed for the migratory birds to thrive. But all the same, the society, individuals, institutions, I'm talking about governments, and even businesses, we need to appreciate the birds and take action to reverse their decreasing populations. So in summary, BirdLife is an active party in reversing the negative trends being experienced in migratory bird populations. And one of the things that drive our actions is science, research. We value data a lot. And all our actions are actually driven by the science that is behind what we see within migratory birds and other birds. BirdLife is the global authority on red listing for birds, which is a very important, process. We support local conservation action to address the threats, and also engage in public awareness, in campaigns, and also education. Right now, there is a campaign that is taking place on illegal killing of birds. We are calling it Flight for Survival. There is a whole website about the Flight for Survival. Please have a look. We engage in policy and advocacy at all levels, engaging the stakeholders, nationally, regionally, and even globally. And in particular, the conventions or the global environmental agreements that seek to protect the migratory birds. In particular, I'm talking about the CMS, Iowa, who will be speaking to this webinar. And the other useful element that we do as BirdLife is to develop tools and best practice guidelines to build sustainability within productive sectors. So we are talking about energy. How can we make the energy infrastructure friendly to birds? So BirdLife is engaging in this. And producing such tools as the sensitivity mapping tool, which is a tool to support decision makers in terms of where do we position or site our infrastructure, sustainably. So the other aspect of BirdLife, which is really key to the organization, is that BirdLife believes in the power of many. We believe in building partnerships to deliver for migratory birds and other birds. And currently, we are having more than 100 organizations within the partnership. 23 of these organizations are in Africa. So feel free to go to our website, BirdLife website. They have so much of information, and check at your locality, wherever you're positioned, actions that you can take for migratory birds. Join a local birding club, join a national partner in your country, a BirdLife national partner in your country, to make the birds, the migratory birds, sing, fly, and soar. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alex, for that overview of bird migration, what it is and what happens along the way. Just to remind everyone, we have the Q&A sections. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to put them there, and you can also put your hand up. While waiting for more questions, Alex, I have one for you. Nowadays, for a lot of us, we can hardly travel without a GPS as we know it. Yet we have birds that sometimes travel from one continent to another. How do they know where they're going? What are they using to find their way?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question and a valid one. How do birds know where they are going, and how do they know the routes which they use to travel to and from their locations? So a lot of research has been carried out about this issue, and you'll find a lot of scientific information about the topic. It has been argued that the the process of migration is actually built in the genetic makeup of birds. Birds have been doing this for over a long period of time. Through the evolution, they have you know they have mastered the art of migration. But one thing we should be able to know is that the age of bird also affects or has implications on the migration success. The mature birds migrate more successfully than the young ones, and therefore it's also a learning process. You find, especially when the migratory birds have to cross the large water bodies, you find that some young birds might not be able to really follow the safest routes, and the young ones end up, drowning. So there are many, scientific research papers that are out there, and it has also been argued that the GPS, how the birds locate they are able to locate their directions is actually somewhere in the body, and they are able to really move without struggling. Yeah.
Thank you so much. At some point when I stayed in Pietermaritzburg in South Africa, I used to look forward to falcons coming in. So I guess it's a question linked to this. Does the same bird tend to go back to the same spot, or they come back to that country but not necessarily the same spot?
Yeah, a good question again, Simangele. And the fact is that many birds are very they exhibit high connectivity. This means that a bird coming to Africa is likely to visit the same area, and when it goes to the other side of the globe, in the northern hemisphere, it's likely to go back to where it came from. And some birds have been observed to use, some migratory birds have been observed to use at the same nesting sites for many years. And of course, some birds are territorial, so you might want to easily think that they will go back to their territories once they finish crossing the waters, going back to the breeding sites. So there is a high connectivity in terms of where birds visit and where birds breed. And in many cases, you have birds that separate during the migratory season, but they go back and find their partners during the breeding season and continue with life. So there is a really high fidelity in terms of how birds use the ecosystem for feeding and even breeding.
Thank you so much for that. That's very interesting that one could be seeing the same individual coming back close to where they are. We have a question that is in the chat box that came from Nadim, I believe. It's asking, it's in line with some of the realities you've shown us of how birds are dying in connection with the wind energy sector. The question is, are there any countries that have established effective policies and guidelines that mitigate death rates of birds within the wind energy sector?
That is a very important point. And about sustainability within the sectors, the productive sectors that we're engaging in. Energy is very important for not only our, making our lives comfort, but even for our economic empowerment. And, I don't know how to put it, but really the technology to do, proper designs is there. And some of the countries have actually gone ahead and enacted laws in their countries which make, a use of unfriendly infrastructure punishable, prosecutable, kind of a thing. And and in terms of guidelines, yes, the international community have come actually together under the auspices of conventions like the Iowa and even CMS to develop guidelines that would help to mitigate, to instill sustainability within energy infrastructure. And bird life has actually been part of the process of developing the guideline. So remember that the Iowa, it is the state parties, it is the governments, it is the governments that are parties to CMS, to Iowa, and they are the ones that have come up with these guidelines. So you would expect that once they go back to their homes, when they are building, when they are approving projects, when they are building power lines with turbines, you would expect them to use or to be guided by these, best practice guidelines that they have agreed upon. But this is not happening. We continue to see, wind turbines being built in very sensitive areas. We continue to see power lines killing birds, which is not really a very good a good thing to experience. Yet all these solutions are there.
Thank you so much for that. But just a reminder to our participants, if you have questions, please put them through the Q&A section so that we easily spot them and respond to them. I can see that quite a number of the questions are coming in from the general charts side, which makes it harder to track. Please move them to Q&A and we will respond. I will give you the last question, Alex. There's the one I see, which I think is more suited for Paul later on once we speak on Kenya. So the question that is asked is, you have birds that migrate within Africa, but you have some that are actually coming from our side, continental Africa, and going outside. Do these two groups follow the same paths? Or they actually differ, that the ones migrating within Africa use a different path than the ones from outside?
A good question, Simangele. Yeah, in Africa, we have what we call intra-African migrants. And in Africa, as you know, we do not have those the seasons which would be unfavorable to birds. We're talking about the winter. except of course for the north, which becomes very cold during winter. So when birds are responding to the season, the summer, they tend to, have the same kind of a direction in terms of movement. So you'd expect during the winter, birds to be moving from north to south. And they're doing this to escape the cold weather or the cold season, to catch the warmer climes in the south. So you'd expect birds coming from Europe, crossing through to the Mediterranean Sea, to North Africa, and moving downwards. So those birds which are in North Africa, they tend to, use the general direction of the movement. But when it comes to many intra-African migrants, the conditions that necessitate their movements is mainly actually the rainy and the dry seasons. Dry, I mean, wet seasons are more productive, so you'd expect birds to move to where the rains have, where we have the rains. For example, when, for example, some parts of West Africa are dry, you'd expect, for example, the Aberdeen stocks to move all the way to Eastern Africa, which by that time is experiencing, rainy season. But of course, there are some birds, like for example the flamingos, using for example the Rift Valley migratory corridor, so you'd expect them to move within back and forth within these regions. So there is mingling between birds, migrating within Africa, and also that's migrate within the continents. I'm talking of Eurasia and Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex, for that presentation and for engaging afterwards. You have a few more questions in the Q&A side that I invite you to respond to in writing, while I invite more speakers for insights. So if you still have a question, you're more than welcome to put them in the Q&A, and we're going to engage with them to that effect. Now, we've heard so much about what bird migration is, why birds migrate, what are some of the challenges they face along the way, and we've seen some trends that are rather not nice. But it is not all doom and gloom. We have a lot of initiatives within Africa working towards to protect those birds, and we're gonna get a glimpse of what is some of the work that is happening in the continent that involves young people and that involves communities as well. Now, to further unpack that, I would love to invite Louisa Kabuba from the Ghana Wildlife Society to give us her insights. Louisa, you have the floor. I can see your presentation, but I can't hear your voice for now. You are muted. Yes.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes, I can see your presentation and I can hear you. You're sounding quite soft, so you may need, yeah.
Okay, just hold on. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
You
Thanks.
can
We
see
can.
the presentation. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see the presentation also.
All right, okay. Good afternoon from Ghana. And first of all, I would like to thank Alex for the very good presentation on bird migrations. It was very insightful and informative. Um, if we listen to Alex, we would realize that he touched a lot more on the threats that are faced by migratory birds on the flyway. And it's not all glooming, like the Manjali mentioned. There are activities that BirdLife partners in Africa and then across the continent, other continents that are actually geared towards helping to conserve birds, helping to get our young people interested in birds and then taking actions for birds and then their habitat. And one of these flagship programs that is actually being carried out by BirdLife partners within the global partnership is the Spring Alive program. So the Spring Alive program is actually, the Spring Alive project is actually a youth program that is geared towards getting our young people to love and involve themselves in conservation of migratory birds and their habitat. So I'll be taking you through what Spring Alive seeks to achieve and showcase a few of the activities that Spring Alive has actually carried out before the COVID and then during the COVID era.
Thanks, Louisa. There is a request from attendees either to get closer to your mic a bit or put your voice up a bit. You're not audible enough. Thanks.
Okay, is it better now?
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for the patience. Yes. So, first of all, I wouldn't want to do an overlap from what Alex presented, but basically, like Alex mentioned, bird migrations are very essential. Um, when conditions are very unconducive, birds migrate southwards and then vice versa northwards for conditions that are more favorable. And it could be short migrations and it could be long migrations, as Alex already mentioned. And I think Alex may have not touched on the flyways, but we actually have three main flyways, as you can see in the presentation. We have the Americans, we have the Africa Euro-Asian, and then we have the East Asian Australian flyway. But I'll be talking more about the African Euro-Asian flyway and what activities we are currently undertaking to get our young children to appreciate the migration of birds and then taking action for these birds. Yes, so we are all here today because of World Migratory Bird Day, which is actually happening tomorrow. And we all know that World Migratory Bird Day is actually an awareness campaign. It seeks to get people to be more conscious about the way we treat migratory birds and getting governments and individuals together to take action for birds. And like Alex mentioned, it's celebrated twice in a year. And the theme for this year is sing, fly, and soar like a bird. And bird migrations are phenomenal. It's fascinating. And it's something that is very, very phenomenal. And the problem with birds migration is like he mentioned, Alex mentioned, are the threats that they face. So it is very important. It is very important that we all come together to actually take action to conserve migratory birds along their flyway. So what is the Spring Alive program? Spring Alive program is, like I mentioned earlier on, it's one of the flagship species, one of the flagship programs of the BirdLife International, and it's actually a program that is meant to get young people to get interested in bird conservation, to get them to take action for birds. And it's actually a bird watching survey that is quite simple, very, very simple, very fun, and it's also very educative. And it's something that every individual can participate in. It actually started in 2006. So, and it started with Europe, but then it spread to Asia, and then by the year 2010, it came down to Africa. And the whole idea is to track the arrival of spring migrants and then record our fair sightings of spring migrants. That's the flagship species of the Spring Alive project on the Spring Alive website. So we have 7 Spring Alive species currently, and these species were chosen based on the fact that you can easily recognize them, and information on them can be found on the website. And they are species that you can actually track easily, and it's something that the kids can easily identify as well. And Spring Alive doesn't just concentrate on our kids, but it also brings teachers, it brings the kids' parents, and it brings all individuals together to actually participate in this bird watching survey, which is also a form of citizen science. And apart from tracking these birds, Spring Alive also engages our young people in other fun activities. So Spring Alive is not all about tracking birds and recording them, but it's also a project that gets our kids to be more innovative, to get our kids to be more proactive, and then take actions to conserve migratory birds. And currently, the countries we have within the Spring Alive project are what you find here. There are over 50 countries within the partnership, within the BirdLife partnership, and more countries can join. If you are a participant today and you wish to engage, or you wish to participate in the Spring Alive project, it's open to everyone. It doesn't matter if you are from Africa or a different continent. So you can actually enroll in the Spring Alive project. It's quite easy. And how do you participate? So if you are interested in tracking Spring Alive species, if you are interested in tracking the first sighting of these species, how do you participate in Spring Alive? So it's so easy. All you have to do is to log on the website that I showed in my previous slide. You just log on, you go to the website, you choose your country, you choose your region, and then you choose the species. So let's keep in mind that it's the first sighting of the species that I mentioned. So you record the first sighting of any of the Spring Alive species that you find. You can do this recording from your home, you can do it from your schools, you can do it whilst at work or on a walk during the weekend. So just look out for these species, and once you sight any of them, you keep it or you record it on the website. And apart, like I mentioned, apart from tracking first sightings of Spring Alive species, Spring Alive is also engaged in a number of activities. And we have resources available, not just on the Spring Alive website, but if you go on BirdLife International, we have a whole lot of educational materials. We have a whole lot of tools that can help you to become familiar with migratory birds, to become familiar with Spring Alive birds and the threats they face, to become familiar with actions that you can take to help conserve migratory birds along their flyway. And on the Spring Alive website, we have guides for teachers. We have very, very interesting, wonderful games that you can easily download. You don't, it's actually free. So you can download Scrabbles, you can download all these guides, and then you can use it to educate your children. You can use it to, if you're a teacher, you can use it to educate your students on Spring Alive. You can use it to not just Spring Alive, but then you can also get them to understand and identify some of the bird species that we have in our country, and then also get them to become interested and then take action for. Yes. Um, so these are some of, this is just a few showcase of some of the resources that you can find. We have stickers, very clear stickers, very nice images that are suitable for kids, and it's something that is very easy for the kids to understand. Yes, and we can all attest the fact that before COVID, when we didn't have restrictions on traveling, we didn't have restrictions on hugging and holding hands, and we could actually go out in groups and mingle. Things were much easier. And during those periods, Spring Alive partners in Africa and across the globe have undertaken a lot of activities with kids, with teachers, and then with adults as well. And some of our volunteers have also been involved massively in Spring Alive projects. So we've actually been able to engage our kids and their teachers in competitions, in walks, in spreading the word about migrations and habitats of birds and the threats they face through a whole lot of activities, um, getting them to actually build their own bird feeders, taking them through bird walks, which was actually not restricted by social distancing, and it was quite engaging and very interesting. And yes, we can all also agree that 2020 has been very tough. 2020 has been a year that put a hold on so many things, put a hold on traveling and gathering as a group. And at the beginning of the year, when COVID hadn't spread to a lot of countries, we actually had a theme for the year, which was how to be a good bird watcher. And most of the Spring Alive partners had very innovative activities, very interesting activities to get people outdoor to engage in bird watching. But due to COVID, we had to be more innovative and take on activities that could be more virtual, activities that would bring just a few people. And this slide would actually give us a snapshot of some of the innovative activities that our teachers, together with our partners and school children, have been able to organize and participate in despite the COVID in 2020. So, prior, so right after there was a lockdown, what we did was to organize a workshop, which is actually a virtual workshop where we had all the partners together to actually share and ideas on how to actually engage our young ones and other people who are interested in migration virtually. because we all know in 2020 everything went virtual. So we did that. That was one of the first activities that we did as a partnership, under the partnership. So right after that, some of the partners have been very innovative, and over here you can see one innovation by the BirdLife partner in South Africa, where we have the chasing migration. So this is an indoor game that you can take part in. It's an indoor game. It's very interesting. It actually helps you to track the spring alive species along the flyway, and you don't have to go out to actually participate in this game. So it's quite very informative as well. And we also had some partners who were very innovative and came out with online competitions that audience could actually take part in. And we also were able to get some of the partners to actually organize online classes for school children. And we were BirdLife International. If you go on the website, you also find crafts on how to get kids into birding. And even though we had COVID and we are still in COVID, we're also, Ghana in particular, were able to organize an essay competition, which was actually virtual. But then when the conditions became, when the lockdown was seized and we could actually move around a little more, we were able to get some of the winners to our office to receive their prizes. So if you go on
Yeah.
the website, on the Spring Alive website, you realize that there are a whole lot of activities that were carried on
Yeah.
during COVID, and we also have virtual tours. We carried out virtual tours. So we all agree that before COVID, we could go out to have bird watching, but because of COVID, we had to stay indoors and take part in bird watch. So we had virtual ones. One was organized by NCF in Nigeria, that's the BirdLife partner in Nigeria. And if you go on our website, you can also get tips on how to actually bird watch from your home, even now that
Yeah.
lockdowns have been.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thank you so much, Louisa.
and
There is a quick,
we also
can
have.
you hear me? Can you hear me, Louisa?
Hello? Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes. There is a quick
Yeah, I can
question.
hear you.
Yes. There's a quick question for you in the chat, which I will take, and then we will got more deeper in the presentation later. There's a question from one of the colleagues asking, do your programs have any ability to integrate parents and guardians? They are thinking more if you have any activities where they can join as a family, not separating just children alone.
Yes, so Spring Alive is not just about getting kids and their teachers, but especially with our bird walks, and like I mentioned earlier on, with the tracking of birds, everyone can take part in that. And even with our bird watching, it's open. If you realize on the slides I have, it's open to everyone. So these are activities that we put out there on our social media platform, and anyone can
Yeah.
join, whether you're an adult. We have volunteers participating, we have families joining these bird walks. So it doesn't really matter if you're an adult. Everyone, once you are interested in learning about these birds, it's actually an opportunity for you. And you don't have to own a binocular. Once you avail yourself, we can always assist you with one, and how to easily use the binoculars and other equipment that you may need for bird watching and other activities. And if
Yeah.
there's a family who is also interested in getting some of these resources, it's always available for such families.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for clarifying that. And it's interesting to see what you're doing with the kids and the fact that you have material that is available online that teachers and parents can use with the kids as well. Just a reminder, if you have more questions for Louisa, put them in the chat and we will engage with them later as we're going to have a Q&A section. Our next speaker is taking us a bit more to some of the work that is happening with much older groups in the space of protecting birds. And that's going to be Paul from Nature Kenya. Paul, you have the floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Simangele. Sorry. Let me share my screen. Hope everyone can see that. So my name is Paul Gashero. I work at Nature Kenya, based in Kenya. And I'll be presenting to you briefly about youth and conservation of migratory birds. Basically taking the Kenyan perspective on how we engage the youth in the conservation of migratory birds in our context. So first, the introduction to who we are. Nature Kenya is the birdlife partner in Kenya. We are also called the East African Natural History Society, established 1909, and we're a membership society, which helps us to derive our strength from our membership to promote our conservation work within our country. And we're basically guided by 4 strategic objectives, which are currently under review, which is saving species, conserving habitats, empowering people, and as well as encouraging ecological sustainability. And here, when we talk about engaging the youth, we are basically saying we are empowering people to supporting nature conservation, which is enshrined within our strategic plan. And our work is based on science, and we use, as indicated by our earlier colleagues, earlier presenters, we use birds as indicators of ecosystem health, and therefore migratory birds are core to our work here in the country. So this has been mentioned by Alex. In Kenya, we have 67 key biodiversity areas. We also host a number of migratory routes, one key one being the Rift Valley Red Sea Flyway. We have migratory birds moving along the East Indian Ocean coastal route, and as well within the Eastern Arc Mountains. We have so far recorded around 60 species of Afrotropical migrants, and as well as 170 species which are Palearctic migrants, which move from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere, with passing through Kenya. And these threats have been mentioned in the presentation by Alex. I don't need to belabor too much on this one. Key threats on migratory birds is basically a lot of energy infrastructure coming up, transmission lines, wind power, wind turbines being brought up, habitat loss was highlighted as well within the short video which was presented earlier in this webinar, as well as wildlife poisoning, which is one of the key drivers of threats with facing migrant birds in Kenya. Our approach that we use in involving youth in our country, we use what basically we're calling engaging through citizen science, which help us in basically monitoring of birds and enshrining the elements of bird watching at the grassroots level, and as well as working with local community groups across the country within key biodiversity areas, based around the key biodiversity areas that we have within our country. And so far we have 26 groups that we are working with across the country. And this help us significantly in biodiversity monitoring, ensuring that we're able to do habitat and site restoration, promoting species protection, advocacy, and creating awareness. And these are core principles in which involving the youth, we enshrine that engagement to ensure that these core principles are promoted across the youth engagement. So in Kenya, when we do migratory birds monitoring annually, working with partners in the country, we carry out water bird counts, which help us in basically monitoring waterfall, which include majority of migratory birds within the Rift Valley lakes and other wetlands within our country. Nature Kenya has, for a long time, at least almost 55 years to date, we have carried out weekly Wednesday morning bird walks, which are very popular to the youth in our country. But this has not happened in the past year because of issues of COVID. But 2019 going backwards, this has been held every week of the month across the 56 weeks of the year, as well as promoting citizen science using mobile phone platforms. And one of them, one locally driven platform is called the Kenya Bird Map, that the youth are able to go out and record birds across different sites. And as well as carrying out what we call IBA monitoring, where we do, which helps us in assessing the health, the status, the trends, and the pressure that are affecting our key biodiversity areas within our country. And you can see using citizen science, people collecting data using mobile phones, we can increase the coverage of data collections within our country. And the map on the right of the screen, you can see quite a lot of points coming up, which are brought about by using citizen science mobile phone application, a Kenya Bird Map, and among others which have been mentioned earlier, like eBird and others which are available available like iNaturalist as well. So that helps us in monitoring our migratory birds. Secondly, when we involve the youth, it's helping us in the youth participating in awareness creation. And key to it is like now tomorrow we are marking the World Migratory Bird, and also it's coinciding with the global birding day that we are promoting, so that people can go out and record birds and enjoy bird watching. So this important global days on birding helps us in creating awareness nationally, as well as working with the site support groups across the country. And key among those groups are like vulture volunteers that we have within our country that helps us in monitoring the volunteers, the threats that monitor the vultures and the threats that are facing the vultures, as well as site support groups across board who are helping in monitoring water birds within the areas that they are based. And also working using like committees. Nature Kenya has a youth committee that gets small funding to go out there and create awareness about conservation, including migratory birds agenda. So the youth have been, given when we involve the youth, this information that comes from the engagement helps us in what you're calling threat removal, that helps us to inform policy to ensure that we're able to safeguard our flyways. And key to it, like from the data that has been collected significantly by using the mobile platform, is helping us in guiding the energy sector in areas that can position wind farms and transmission lines. Among others is promoting migratory birds. Given like now tomorrow, we are marking the World Migratory Birds, and this is becoming a national process that is promoted nationally within our country, as well as influencing and eliminating illegal activities that affect birds, like poisoning or transmission lines collisions, transmission line collision, or issues to do with illegal hunting, and then as well as supporting and engaging the youth in participation in landscape restoration, because as mentioned in that video which we watched earlier, was we are getting a lot of habitat loss, and restoring these habitats would ensure that our migratory birds find suitable habitats as they move from whichever direction they're coming from. So as a key motivation for the youth is we need to ensure that one thing that we have learned is to adopting of technology, and as well as using social media in promoting birding and conservation of biodiversity across board. Recognizing their contribution to conservation, like every time youth participate and they contribute some data, recognizing their name and having their name against that is very useful for recognizing their contribution, as well as availing basic equipment, binoculars, scopes. Maybe if someone has a vehicle, to be able to move people from one point to another, because a lot of this work engaging the youth is mostly voluntary, and therefore by availing basic equipment, providing basic platform for the youth to participate, helps in encouraging the youth to participate fully within the sphere of monitoring and conservation of migratory birds. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, this provides you with a bit of a snapshot of how we have engaged the youth within our country, and we are very proud that we have youth that are fully encouraged and want to participate. And by providing this platform, we're able to go very far within our conservation spheres within our country, which can be replicated across board in whichever country that this wants to be done. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was interesting, especially showing how you're integrating technology, seeing that it's becoming something that young people are using. Hopefully, if you are from Kenya and you are in this webinar, you will reach out to Paul afterwards. I have one question for you before I move. You mentioned that one of the threats to the birds is poisoning. Is this usually intentional, where people are trapping them? A matter of a habitat getting poisoned or something that is their source of food? So is it like intentional or unintentional?
So here we have both intentional and unintentional. Recently, when people just like 2 weeks ago, 2-3 weeks back, a number of crown cranes were affected, having fed on treated seeds in a crop field. So that was an intentional. Same case with vultures. But we also have intentional poisoning, especially on irrigation schemes, where people do intentionally hunt or intentionally poison, especially the large soaring birds like storks, mainly for food. And this is happening around a lot around major irrigation schemes within our country, which they're growing rice, which as the main crop. And this is a big issue that we are trying to address, mainly working closely with government to try and promote stopping of wildlife poisoning within our country.
Thank you so much. There's another question we received from Facebook, but I'm going to park it for later. I will mention it so that the colleagues start thinking about it. Someone is asking, Desmond, how do I, as a farmer, deal with birds, especially knowing how they disturb the farm produce? I'm bringing it now because you just touched something that connects to it, but we have more time for discussion later, so I'm going to go into it. Thanks, Paul. Colleagues,
thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, allow me to introduce and welcome our last speaker, Dr. Jack Trovelli, who is from the Secretariat of the African Eurasian Migratory Waterbirds Agreement. So far, we've went around of what is some of the work that exists in the ground in Africa to protect these birds. We've seen some of the work that is happening with children who are as young as primary school level, working with their parents. We've seen from Paul some of the work that is happening with youth, which is a group that is much older. And some questions had come up earlier of what is happening in a policy environment. Of course, the fact that these birds can move from one country to another, one continent to another, means we need some form of cooperation between the regions and the places where they move from. And our last speaker will be introducing us to exactly what kind of work exists in that space. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Jack. You have the floor.
Thank you, Simangeli. It's a pleasure to be with you. Welcome to everybody. I will deliver a presentation on behalf of the World CMS family, the Convention on Migratory Species, and you will see which kind of instrument the CMS family have and which kind of action we have on the ground, because as you mentioned, Simengele, birds are moving across the borders, across the frontier, and if we want to keep our birds, we need to work with the other countries, not only our neighbors, but sometimes countries as far as the high Arctic, for example, for some water birds. So I will try to share my screen. And yeah, that's it. Just share the full. Okay. So the World Migratory Bird Day we will celebrate tomorrow have been initiated in 2006. It's an annual global awareness raising campaign, and we have already seen a lot of action on awareness raising. Yeah. There is a mandate from the parties. The parties in our wording is a country which have joined the agreement or the convention. And I'm happy to say that since 2017, there is a three-party collaboration between the Convention on Migratory Species, the AEVA agreement, and an NGO called Environment for the Americas. So it's really now a global, because in the past there was a World Migratory Bird Day, mainly for the old world, and an International Migratory Bird Day for the new world, meaning the Africas, in fact. So this year, the theme is Sing, Fly, Soar Like a Bird, just to make people aware that birds are everywhere, in pristine habitat, but also in backyard, in gardens, and they deserve attention, but also the reward is for us kind of well-being. Many people during the sanitary crisis have begun to listen to the bird, to look at them, and that enjoy it. Yeah. So it's really important. The World Migratory Bird Day now has two peak celebrations, the second Saturday of May and the second Saturday of October. We chose a Saturday because for many people working during the week, Saturday is a good day to go outside to see birds, even if this year and last year was quite particular because of the COVID situation. And we have added a second peak day in October at the request of many African parties and India, for example, because those countries have more birds to show to people in October than in May. So under the CMS is the Global Convention on Migratory Species, dealing not only with birds, but also with fish, sharks, mammals. So what are the specific issues dealing with migratory birds? First, CMS has set up a preventing poisoning of migratory bird working group. And we have published, and you can find it on the website of the CMS, the guidelines to prevent the risk of poisoning to migratory birds, which is really an issue for vulture in particular, but not only. The CMS also create an energy task force multi-stakeholder platform for reconciling renewable energy development with conservation of migratory birds. And this is one of the threats already mentioned in one of the previous presentations in Kenya, for example, with line transmission all along the Rift Valley, causing a number of impact on migratory birds. The CMS has set up also an action plan for migratory land birds in the African Eurasian region through a resolution adopted in 2015 and 17, sorry. And of course, this action plan has developed a program of work for the Land Bird Working Group. It's very important to promote the synergies and to support to address habitat loss and degradation, not only with parties, so mean states and government, but also international governmental organizations, the climate change convention, the convention on desertification, and of course NGO, which are really the actor we can push even governments. And of course, CMS has International Species Action Plan, European roller and European turtle dove, which leave Europe after the breeding season in August and winter mainly in Africa. Another instrument is a memorandum of understanding on the conservation of migratory bird of prey in Africa and Eurasia. We call it Raptor MOU in a short. A memorandum of understanding is not legally binding like a convention or like an agreement like IVA, but at least it's promote collaboration between the country which signed this memorandum of understanding. And they agree to work together to protect raptors and to have coordinated action. So you can see here the map of the range states. There is 131 range states, and 61 have already signed the MOU, so they engage themselves on a voluntary basis, but they engage themselves, they participate to the meeting. And it should be noted that almost half, 27 to be precise, are states in Africa. So the main objective of the MOU is to halt and reverse the population declines of globally threatened, near-threatened species, and avoid and reduce threat for all 93 migratory raptor species, which is quite a lot. So the Raptor MOU draft some years ago a vulture multi-species action plan, and I'm sure that some participants are engaged in this action plan. The main objective is to address the Africa vulture crisis, of course, and we have regional action, West Africa, for example, poisoning for persecution, East and Southern Africa, sentinel poisoning, for persecution. This action plan have been on the basis of this action plan, an implementation plan have been developed last year. In addition, there is a specific Egyptian vulture action plan and a Shaker global action plan adopted in 2014. And there is some country in Europe, because they use Saker falcon for falconry, some country in Central Asia, and 14 African countries which have joined this plan and focusing on electrocution, international trade, of course, and it's quite often illegal trade and lack of knowledge. So there is the parties, the member of this action plan are gathering to exchange information, to take stock of success and failure, and do their best to improve the conservation status of this fantastic falcon. The IVA now. So I'm head of the secretariat of the IVA, the executive secretary, and Evelyn Moloko, which is with me in this webinar, is the African coordinator. So we have within IVA 2 people dedicated to Africa. It should be noted that either CMS, the Raptor MOUs, or IVA are not instrument full of staff. It's between 35 for CMS, 12 for IVA, 2 for Raptor MOU. But we are doing our best because we are trying to gather ranch states and parties to act together. So we are not acting on the ground directly, we are acting through the states, through the NGO, but we are trying to help a coordination between all action, because it makes no sense to have action on breeding ground if the threats are in the wintering ground, and the reverse is true as well. So the AIVA, the Agreement on the Conservation of African Eurasian Migratory Bird, is a legally binding intergovernmental treaty. So it means when you sign and you join AIVA, when decisions are taken during a meeting of a party, the government are legally bound by the resolution. We have 82 contracting parties, 38 from Africa. So you can see the map. We would like to see some country like Mozambique, Angola, or others to join, because they are really important, especially those, or Namibia, those which are sharing coastline. And we are promoting, as I mentioned, concerted and coordinated actions for conservation of migratory waterbirds and their habitat. So we are dealing with 255 species. And for implementing the treaty and the resolution, we have set up a strategic planning for 9 years, with 5 objectives. 4 are directly on conservation issue. Of course, you have sustainable conservation, mainly threatened and near threatened species. The second objective is on sustainable management. When a species is used either for hunting, subsistence hunting, or leisure hunting, we have to see if this use is sustainable or not. The third objective is to focus on BirdLife would say the important bird area, so the site, the very important site. But we have added 2 years ago a very important objective as well for migratory species, is to protect habitat in the wider environment, because some species like the flamingo are really gregarious species, but you have other species which are widespread in the wider environment. So we have to take action also there. And of course, the last objective is to secure resources to implement the 4 first objectives. Some years ago, it has been said that the implementation in Africa was not satisfactory for many reasons. So all parties of AIVA decided to have a dedicated plan of action for Africa, and it is the second plan of action. This time it's running from 2019 to 2027. So it's helped African party to implement the AIVA strategic plan. It has been developed through a highly consultative process. You have met in some country in Africa to discuss this plan of action. It has been adopted during the MOP in Durban. The stakeholders for implementation are African contracting parties, of course, which are supposed to work with local, national, and regional stakeholders. And of course, we are invited all African and non-African ranch states. It means that even not being a party to AIVA, you can collaborate with AIVA. Namibia, Mozambique, Angola, you can collaborate with us without joining. And quite often, a country begins to work with us, they know better what we are doing, and after a few years, they are joining the agreement to increase their efficiency, their own efficiency. The AIVA governing bodies are classically a standing committee working between the meeting of the parties, and a technical committee which gives the best advice on because our action has science-based evidence. And of course, this AIVA governing body are working with the secretariat and the partners organization. So we have partnership with, of course, a lot of UNEP program and MES, not only CMS, but also the CBD, the huge umbrella for biodiversity, which will meet in October this year for the post-2020 framework for biodiversity, CITES, dealing with international trade on threatened species. Many other UN bodies, like the Food and Agriculture Organization, we have a huge program in Sahel with the FAO, dealing with monitoring birds, but also studying the sustainable use of those birds because it was almost unknown. And of course, the World Heritage Convention with some site like the Bandarguin or other site. And the Ramsar Convention, which is dealing mainly with habitat, wetlands habitat. We are working also with international organizations. I will not list all of them. You have them on the slide, and regional organization. Should be noted that we are working with the African Union, of course, and many regional authorities. Next slide. So we have we focus on some endangered species. And for that, we have specific species action plan to develop a specific program. So you can see here with an asterisk and in bold, the intra-African migrants, the Benguela coastal seabird, 9 species, the gray-crowned crane, the lesser flamingo, the white-winged flufftail, one of the rarest bird, the Madagascar pond heron, the slaty egret. Because if even the name is Madagascar pond heron, for example, this species is also observed in Eastern Africa. So we need to collaborate between the stronghold in Madagascar and the other country. Unfortunately, you have also 2 African species, the Makoa duck and the shoebill, which have no established international working groups. The IVA Secretariat is not able to manage all these working groups, so quite often either a party or an NGO takes the lead to implement this action plan. It's useful, of course, for us, and it's useful also for the NGO or the state, because it means that all decisions are made on an international basis with all countries, and then, of course, the NGO or one state could push for implementation. So, species activities on the ground. I will not detail all of them because the time is running, but you have some of them. For example, for lesser flamingos, well known in Kenya, we are transferring knowledge to local experts in Senegal and Mauritania on satellite tagging to monitor the movement of these species, which was not known. And we are working with the CBD BioBridge initiative and some funding from UK. For the northern bald ibis, we are working in Morocco where the species has increased, but also in Algeria for the reintroduction of the species. And the donor is the European Commission. For the slaty egret, we will have a meeting in Botswana, and we have quite a number of key range states, mainly in the southern part of the continent. For the white-winged flufftail, we are working in Ethiopia to keep the wetlands where the species is breeding, and we are working also with South Africa. So that, very quickly, some examples. The resource project led by FAO, I mentioned already it's to monitor birds there in very important wetlands, so waders and ducks mainly, and we are also studying the sustainable use of those species. Would like to thank, and Evelyn Moloko, myself are ready to answer any question. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much for that overview of the work that is happening as countries collaborate with each other A quick question from my side. You did mention that in IVA, currently about 38 African countries are party to the agreement. Of course, we have more countries than that in the continent. Do you have any idea why we don't have the rest of the continent having been part of the agreement?
Yeah, some parties are about to join. For example, Cameroon, because when you join a legal instrument like AEVA, usually you need an agreement from the parliament. So it's a long process to join AEVA. You need the parliament to authorize either the president, the prime minister, or the minister of environment to sign the agreement. So it's take a long time. You have to explain to the member of the parliament what is AEVA and so on. So, for example, Cameroon, within 4 years, has done almost all the steps. But there is one or two now to go, and the president has to sign. Some other, depending of the minister. For example, in Namibia, I met 2 years ago the Minister of Environment. I explained to him, he was interested, but then the minister changed. So it's why we need really the support also of the NGO, the national NGO, but also the local NGO to push for the accession. A good example is Botswana, where BirdLife Botswana has done a fantastic job raising awareness of the civil servant and the minister himself. So we are working NGO and AEVA, our secretariat, hand in hand for promoting accession. But thanks, it's really a good question. And if everybody push in the same sense, I'm sure more countries will appear in green, meaning will join AEVA.
Thank you so much for articulating the role of NGOs in this. We do know that MEAs tend to be a party-led process, but of course there is a bigger role for NGOs in the decision-making process itself and in the implementation, and you've given us a good idea of how that is happening at IVA. We have other questions in the chat. This is between Louisa and Paul. One of you can respond. We have a question that is asking, is there an opportunity to participate in a bird watching training course? And the other one linked to that from the same person was, we've mentioned about birds and social media and learning. It's a question of, are records of birds through social media reliable? Paul, since you work in the space and on working with technology and taking young people for bird watching, I will move on your side. Do you have a training for being a bird watcher?
So, thank you, Mswali. There we have, in Kenya, we have an organized training which we call Fundamentals of Ornithology, which provides with skills on bird watching. But to become a bird watcher, that provides you just a basic, but to become a good bird watcher, you need to practice and participate and engage in bird watching. And that's a lifetime type of engagement for you to become a good bird watcher. On issues of using social media, social media is good, especially like Facebook or Instagram, where people are already posting photos. And even iNaturalist is one of the platforms that people do post and locally and internationally, and this helps in people posting photos of birds to identify, or birds which have been hurt, and people are able to identify these species and provide locations of the same. So I think it's another way of being able to track birds within our landscape by people posting the birds using photographs and saying where they have seen them. And therefore, if there's someone who is monitoring this, especially in those platforms, you're able to monitor the movement of birds locally and internationally. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know we touched a lot on bird watching. I would love to introduce a new term, and I hope one of the speakers can be able to clarify. We also have bird ringing, right? Alex, Paul, if you'd love to explain what is bird ringing and what's the role of bird ringing again in the conservation of migratory birds?
Does Alex want to take that one, or I take it as well? If I may, the role of bird ringing. Here in Kenya, we have had one of the longest bird ringing exercise, which is held every October, November, December within the Eastern Arc Mountains, on the base of the Eastern Arc Mountains within the Ngulia area. And here people catch birds or mist nest them to catch birds, to put tags on them and rings with details of identity. And this, within our country, the rings are associated with a registry within the National Museums of Kenya. And therefore, if that bird is caught somewhere else by another bird ringer somewhere in Europe or somewhere in South Africa, in the southern African countries, they're able to associate where this bird was actually caught. And last year when they did this ringing, there were birds which were caught from Brussels, ringed in Brussels, others which were ringed in some place in Germany. And this provides to see how long this bird has been alive, how far it has traveled, and the hoops it has been able to skip, because some of them have also been ringed in Ngulia and has been recorded in the same site a couple of years down the line. So that it just helps us in monitoring how these birds are faring on globally, basically. Thanks.
Thank you so much for explaining this. When I was young, it used to be one of my favorite things to do. Alex, over to your side, if you have any more insights to add on bird ringing.
Yeah, not much that I want to add to what Gashero has said. Gashero has put it very well. That bird ringing helps us to understand the migration phenomenon better. And it is one of the oldest, approaches to study bird migration. And what I would like to say is that recently, with the more advanced technology, other approaches have been developed such that it is possible to place, bird tracking devices, and you're able to receive signals and check how the birds are moving from one place to another. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And the last question I will take, we have a question on the Q&A that is dedicated mainly to the Secretariat of IVA. What happens when a country that is party to IVA does something? It could be building infrastructure or anything that is not in line with the guidelines of IVA. Jack, you are muted. It's a question related to monitoring and evaluation of how countries are implementing the framework. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I correctly, I was thinking, if I correctly understand the question is, which country are doing well and others less? That's the sense, because monitoring and so on. Yeah. So what we are doing within IVA, every 3 years, parties have to report their activities through a template. So we ask the same question to each party, and they send it 6 months before the MOP. We are analyzing the answers, and we are showing where we have made progress, where we have not made progress. So it's difficult to say that a country is not doing well, because it depends also on the resources you have. Some ministry dealing with biodiversity in Africa have so few people, and quite often it's the same for the NGO. There is not so many, I will not say activists, but people pushing. So of course we are trying to to embed everybody in the same sense. The action plan, for example, I mentioned for some species are really good exercise because even if you are not a party yet to EWA, if you are within the range of the species, you can ask to participate. Slaty great for any lesser flamingo, for example. And then you begin to learn how to work. And of course, we are trying, but as many MEAs and many other people, to do some capacity building to help people. Unfortunately, the resources are really few. So we can do as much as we can. We have been supported by a special program from the European Commission, thanks to them. They're supporting the African initiative, Switzerland also, UK. So we are trying to bring to gather some money, some funding, mainly from Western Europe, and to invest it in Africa. Yeah.
Thank you so much for highlighting that reality that sometimes there is very strong political and will to do activities, but there needs to be resources that match that as well, and seeing the work that you're doing in order to support countries to do the work. Evelyn, you would love to contribute something to this? You've got the floor.
Thank you very much, Simangele. Thank you very much, Jacques, for that very beautiful presentation, and you did it excellently. It's really a pleasure and an honor to have the EWA Executive Secretary with us. Just to add to the response to that question about what happens also when a party contravenes its obligations to EWA, for example, constructions in an area, we've seen windmills and wind turbines and power lines in areas that are of key importance for migratory water birds and impede their movements. I would just mention here quickly, in addition to Jacques' response, that the EWA as well as CMS and RAMSA have implementation review mechanisms, whereby when there are threats, current ongoing threats or potential threats from developmental activities to migratory water birds, the populations and or their habitats, these mechanisms permit the contracting parties to be able to review in the framework of whichever convention or treaty. RAMSA has the RAMSA advisory missions, for example. CMS has a recently approved in the 12th meeting of the parties an implementation review mechanism, and EWA from its resolution 4.6 has the implementation review process, whereby at least for the EWA process, there is a form whereby anyone, including NGOs or other organizations, can report to the Secretariat, to the standing committee basically of EWA, these kinds of contraventions, and then these are taken on board with the contracting parties because the governments are the ones who have signed up the obligation to implement and are thus held responsible in this regard. And these processes basically provide advisory missions, which could be field missions or otherwise as needed to address the situation. So providing guidance and advice to the governments based on what the situation is, what are the conditions on the ground. And in the case of RAMSA, for example, I would quickly add that if the wetland, for example, which is of key importance, is seen that the conditions, the ecological conditions no longer fulfill the conditions for being of international importance for the migratory water birds, for example, then they have this Montreux record on which the site will be placed until the conditions are fulfilled once again from rehabilitation exercises and so on, or other conservation actions. So just a quick addition in that regard. So there are conditions, of course, where the governments are expected to report themselves, it's difficult to have a government reporting itself like, I have done very badly. So EWA has this advantage that the NGOs and other partners are able to also provide such reports based on which the EWA governing bodies and the Secretariat can then address the parties, and these have proven to be very useful. And also that these missions sometimes, quite often actually, are held in collaboration between the different MEAs. So RAMSA, CMS, World Heritage Convention and other MEAs work together through these advisory field missions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. There is a question I skipped earlier on. I would love to take it to you, Alex and Paul, before we close, that came from Facebook. He's a farmer. There's birds. Sometimes they bring trouble. I'm going to rephrase the question. Apart from poison, in your experience, what other options do they have to deal with the challenge of having birds in their farms. Alex, your mic is on. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Simangele. And farmers' birds is usually a very convoluted process to bring them together, because some birds are pests and others are not. And some birds actually, when they are regarded as national pests, the governments have mechanisms to control them. In many cases, I've observed, countries having to, for example, spray pests like the Quelea. So there are many approaches that can be taken to control the pests. The problem comes when the farmer wants to use, very punitive or very unsustainable means to control the pests. Like Gashero talked about the cranes feeding on treated seeds, and after which they died. This is where the problem is. And of course, in terms of controlling the pests at the farmer level, there are methods that are recommended. And of course, using chemicals is not one of them. I think when I was growing up, we used to go to the farmland and scare the birds physically. This is beneficial, but in the literature out there, and in fact, the recommendations or the guidelines that we've put in place as BirdLife in terms of minimizing the risks of negatively impacting on birds in agricultural fields. There are many approaches that we can use, and people have used even dogs to scare the birds. But really the point is, which approaches can you use such that you don't impact negatively on other aspects of the biodiversity, not only birds, but even wild animals.
Thank you so much, Alex, for highlighting that actually there's a whole document articulating the guidelines on this and sharing a few examples. We've reached the end of the webinar. I have learned a lot on my side, from flyways to bird watching to bird ringing and all the other things. And I would love to extend the thanks to our speakers who've been able, one, to broaden our understanding of what bird migration really is, give us an overview of some of the work that is happening in the continent in getting young people and children involved in conservation. While we end, I am going to invite Fred from the African Wildlife Foundation, who is actually part of the Secretariat of the African CSO's Biodiversity Alliance, to give us closing remarks. For those who don't know, the event was brought together by ACBA and BirdLife, and ACBA is an alliance of African CSOs that have come together to influence policies specifically in the CBD, but we're also working in our respective countries in different areas. Fred, you have the floor for closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Simangele, and I would like to thank BirdLife for the cooperation that we've had in delivering this webinar today. Look, I have learned so much just listening to you guys in the last 2 hours. Collectively, it's a powerhouse of knowledge, and I'm very thankful that I just had the opportunity to engage. I would also like to thank Simangele for her able moderation and leadership. She always comes through very powerfully in bringing voices together. Information is power, and I really like the presentation Alex brought to all of us. I thought I knew about birds, but Alex, you just next level today. Thanks for giving us the idea of what birds are, the numbers on the continent, the relationship between the North and the South, and the reasons for migration. That was really, really powerful. And Louisa, thanks as well for bringing home to us the role that young people could play going forward in the nurturing of young people. Your Spring Alive program really needs to spring alive, and I think the work you're doing it's excellent. Paul, thanks for giving us insights into the Kenya program, and more broadly, insights into what BirdLife is doing, the mass mobilization of young people, the engagement through citizenship initiatives. That was really powerful. And I think this is a powerful model for conservation as a whole. And certainly, Jack, thanks a lot for bringing in the higher level linkages with policy in terms of how change can happen, not just at the individual level, but at a collective level, at the nation level, and at the global level. And certainly this message is really critical now as we move forward towards COP15. There is no better time than now for us to globally get our heads around the agenda of securing our diversity. And there is no better place but to begin local so that we can connect globally. And I'm really, really glad that you brought this message powerfully together. But I can't end without just bringing it one or two more things. You've given us collectively, and I saw at some point we had 72 people on the call. You've given us collectively so much information today. Evelyn as well, thanks a lot for your participation. You've given us so much information today. And the question that I ask the young people and those of us participating is, what are you going to do with this information? You can go back and just say, wow, this is great information, and go to bed with it, or you can do something about it. And I would challenge you to do something about it at 3 levels. At the individual level, think about what you begin to do to really make the life of birds on this continent and globally thrive. They're simple things, and we had great examples out there. Join a club, do something in your community to help birds thrive. But if you haven't yet joined a group, this is an opportunity. BirdLife has provided you this open door. There are many birding clubs around. Join them and be part of the movement. It's great to do things alone. It brings change, but it's even better to work with others. And BirdLife and its network provides you with that opportunity. And if for some reason there's no network in your area, contact the central office, ask them if you can begin a BirdLife in your village, some kind of a group or something. You can always start something. And then lastly, I really think that the work of BirdLife and the work of the clubs needs to move to that next level of policy influence that Jack talked about. So BirdLife is great, but BirdLife can be greater if in our countries we become the advocates for birds. And this is really critical. So international money is actually not as important as our individual action as Africans in standing up for birds. Money is great, but we can do a lot without money. So let's pull together as organizations and advocate for conservation of bird life on the continent. Let's not wait for money. In our little ways, let's talk to our governments. Let's talk to our policymakers. Let them stand up for birds, because birds are relevant to our biodiversity, to our ecology, to our economies, to our lifestyle. Let's make birding cool, and let's make birding a key part of the way we want to progress forward as a continent. So that's my call to you guys, to stand up and let's work together to make this a truly great place for birds. So thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure hearing you. I've learned tons today, and I'm glad that I have this privilege of just giving a few words to you all. Over to you, Simangale.
Thank you so much, Fred. And lastly, Ken from BirdLife, your closing remarks.
Thank you very much, and I hope you can hear me. It's been great seeing all of you at this webinar. And I think the summary by Fred has been fantastic, and I would not like to dilute it. I would just like to say, in addition to what Fred has said, I think this webinar has demonstrated what we can do together for an aspect of biodiversity. You know, today we are talking about birds. Tomorrow we'll be talking about something else. I think we need to continue putting our our heads and hands together for the good of nature in Africa. And I think there's nothing as exciting as seeing Africans taking action for African problems. You know, seeing those young children with binoculars and scopes, I think it's fantastic. It's exciting. It's something we must encourage. And working with ACBA and AWF has been great. Thank you very much, Simangele, for fantastic moderation as always. And all the colleagues who have made presentations. I think it's been wonderful. And seeing you, Jack, and your team has been lovely. And I would like to just say that as BirdLife, we are committed. We do not work from Nairobi or from Accra or from Cambridge. We work at the grassroots. It is Nature Kenya, it is Ghana Wildlife Society, it is Birdwatch Zambia, or BirdLife Botswana, doing the work, and we provide the technical support. And of course, we cannot do this alone. Over and above our partners, we continue working with the governments. I mean, because at the end of the day, it is government's responsibility to get these things done. But as Jack said, it is, we all need to work together. And of course, the international mechanisms are key, like, such as CMAs and IAWA, and we'll continue to collaborate. And finally, I hope that you will get another chance to do this again. I feel like this is only the beginning. And if called again, please come and let's do this again. Maybe for birds, maybe for something else. And just wish you to enjoy the rest of the day and do have a great weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day ahead, a great weekend. We look forward to seeing you in more BirdLife and ACBA events as we explore the very diverse world of biodiversity conservation. Can I request all our panelists to just put their videos on for a quick photo? We're compensating for not being in person. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to engaging with you further. Have a great weekend ahead. Bye. And thanks, Elaine, for showing your face. We have a translator who's always and never appears in pictures. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye. Happy Migratory Birthday tomorrow.
Thank you.
Au revoir. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Janvan, thank you. I'm jumping on another call.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Aline.